So first thing that we're going to go over is called the Caliphate. Okay, the Caliphate is just a term that is used to describe the extent of where like Muslim country is, or where a majority of Muslims live. Okay, so if you were thinking about today, all right, it's a pretty broad area with the Middle East. Basically, the border essentially is Pakistan and India to the east, and then it stretches all the way through North Africa. Okay, and then even some places in Southeast Asia, like Malaysia, is practically entirely Muslim. So it is right now. The Caliphate's pretty big, all right. But there was a process to make it bigger. It started off with just the city of Mecca, all right, and then it's going to grow from there. So after Muhammad dies, all right, they needed to figure out who was going to be the next leader of Islam. All right. Now, what they call a caliph is a successor to Muhammad. All right, so who was going to be the next caliph was actually a huge controversy because people disagreed on who the next person should be. Okay, essentially, what ends up happening is Abu Bakr becomes the next head caliph, and then there's three other ones. The other main one's name is Ali, who is a cousin of Muhammad, so it was actually a blood-related descendant. All right. Their goal right after Muhammad died was to spread Islam as far as they could. Now, Abu Bakr is the leader at this point, and he essentially says, well, we need to spread this because we need everyone to be believing in the Muslim, or to become Muslims. So he invokes something called jihad. Now, the word jihad does not technically mean this. However, Abu Bakr uses the term to mean it. So he kind of adjusts the meaning of it to mean that it's an armed struggle against anyone who is not a believer. So essentially, if he wants to spread the religion, he can use armed force to kind of control an area. And then just by controlling that area, people will naturally kind of become Muslim because their political leaders are Muslims, and it'll kind of slowly but surely take care of itself. So what happens is he forms a very large army with the other caliphs, and they begin to expand the empire. They control all of the Arabian Peninsula, and then also move into Persia, so like present-day Iran, and even into Pakistan a little bit, Egypt, and Syria. So what you would think of as any of the area basically that is the Middle East today, that is looked at as the Middle East. This is all done within 100 years of the religion starting. All right. Then the Umayyad Caliph, who comes afterwards, continues to expand. They can start to control almost the entirety of North Africa and then into Iberia. Does anyone know where what countries today are the Iberian Peninsula? Yes?
Spain and Portugal.
Spain and Portugal. Very good. So hopefully you guys learned that last year in geography, but I know it's been a while. Okay, so up even into Europe. Okay, so now Islam is really starting to compete with areas that are historically Catholic. All right. And it even does get into some of the border of India too, a little bit, modern day India. All right, so here's a map that kind of shows you. So originally, while Muhammad was still alive, it was just this area right here where it's dark green. All right, and then with the first caliphs, they get to this light green area, so you can see they do get quite a bit of control. Okay, and then lastly, okay, is these yellow parts. So you'll see how big the caliphate actually gets in a pretty short time, in just 120 years or so. They get control of that large of an area, right? And they're all tied together through religion. All right. So the reason why they were so successful, you couldn't tell, that's a big area that they were controlling. Okay, why were they able to do that? Well, they did have a good military with good leadership. Right? That's a very important thing. Right? If you're going to spread that far using a military, it's got to be good, or else your progress would get stopped. Okay. Another really important thing is that those empires surrounding them, which you saw on that map, primarily to the north, would be the Byzantine Empire. Does anyone know any background on the Byzantine Empire? Like, why did that empire begin? Anyone know anything about it? Do you know something?
I don't know much. I believe it was predominantly Catholic.
It was Catholic, yes.
And at one point it was also the Ottoman Empire. That area is just
later on does.
Empires.
You're right. So later on, it does become part of the Ottoman Empire. So the Byzantine Empire was the eastern half of the Roman Empire. So the Byzantine Empire was Rome, and then once Rome, kind of like the actual city of Rome and Western Europe fell, the Byzantine Empire kind of started their own thing. So this is a Catholic area. Okay, the Sassanid Empire was to the northeast. You could see it was kind of like northern Iran, Iraq area. They were really weak. They'd been fighting wars and essentially were completely exhausted. The people did not really like living in those areas because there was no religious freedom, so they were forced to worship one particular religion. People didn't have a lot of rights, so they kind of welcomed a new government to come in, or invaders, so they could be part of something different. And also the Muslims had lower tax rates than these two empires had, so that was another nice thing that people were like, well, that wouldn't be bad. I wouldn't mind paying lower taxes. So that kind of pushed people to not only invite the invaders, but aid them. I mean, think about if you were, if an invading army came in and all of a sudden just the common people were giving them food, giving them shelter, supporting them, it's going to cause a lot of success. So what we're going to do now, if you guys look at that box on the notes that is blank, on that first page it says primary source, I think it says primary source analysis on it. I'm going to read this primary source out loud. As I read it, anything that answers this question in it, I just want you to write in that box. So basically, it could be 1 or 2 word answers. I'm not asking you to write a paragraph in that box, just a couple bullets, that have just a word, like a phrase or a word, anything that would describe it. So the question is, what does this primary source tell us about the conditions of the conquered people? So if we're talking about people who were conquered by these Muslim armies, what conditions were their daily lives like after they were conquered? So I'm going to read this out loud. You can follow along on the screen if you'd like. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful, this is what Khalid ibn al-Walid would grant to the inhabitants of Damascus. He promises to give them security for their lives, property, and churches. Their city walls shall not be demolished, neither shall any Muslim be quartered in their houses. Thereunto we give to them the pact of Allah and the protection of His Prophet, the caliphs and the believers, so long as they pay the tax, nothing but good shall befall them. All right, so what were some very important things? Did anyone hear anything from that, Skylar?
As long as they pay the tax, they'll be good.
Okay, so just pay taxes and you'll receive protection. Nothing bad will happen to you. Okay. What other living conditions were there that we got out? Yeah, Chase? Okay, what does that mean to be quartered in the houses?
Like, stuck in there and, can't come out.
Okay, so you're on the right track. So essentially, if the Muslims aren't going to quarter troops into the homes of people. So a lot of times what happened, and this happened for a long time in history, kind of stops in about the 1900s, when an invading empire would go into someone else's area, their soldiers would just live amongst the people. So your family would host a soldier and be like, okay, feed him, make sure that he's somewhere to sleep. And there's nothing you can do about it because they have all the weapons and all the power. They're saying this will never happen. You won't have to do that. Okay, good. So they have a little freedom from the military. That's good. Yeah.
Can I go to the bathroom?
Yeah. Anything else that anyone saw in there? Yep.
In a sense, their lives got better.
Okay, in a sense, their lives got better. What makes you say that?
I mean, they didn't have to listen to, or they were paying lower taxes. They
Okay.
had more freedom.
Okay, they had more freedom. What were some of those freedoms that they had? What did you see? Real early on.
Security.
Okay, security. Okay, they also have the freedom to own property, which is a big thing. And their churches will not be destroyed. So if they didn't want to be Muslim, they didn't have to be a Muslim. Right? So that's a very important thing. Okay, the whole idea was that the idea of what spreading the religion was that if we kind of just take over these areas, over time, slowly but surely, the faith will grow. And that did, for the most part, happen if we look over into time. Okay? All right. Now, one thing that many of you probably do know about Islam is that there's actually a split in it. And I was kind of talking about this a little bit before, about how there was a little bit of conflict early on with who would be the successor to Muhammad as the leader of the faith. However, even though that started a conflict, it didn't split the faith entirely right off the bat. The faith gets really bad after those first four caliphs expand it. All right, so after those first four caliphs, the Umayyads take power, and that's when things really get bad. So, first things first, okay? Ali, one of the first four caliphs, who many Muslims believed should have been the leader, the main leader of the faith, is murdered. And this guy is one of Muhammad's cousins. He's the living heir to Muslim rule. So these people who followed Ali were really, really upset that he was killed. All right, that creates a huge split. Then after that, the Umayyads who take control are going to move the capital from Mecca to Damascus. All right, that's a huge deal. All right, if you were living in Saudi Arabia, the center of your whole religion was right there. Then all of a sudden, they move it all the way up to Syria. Okay, it's a completely different location. The center of the faith has now changed, and that made a lot of people upset. Think about like now, okay, getting from Mecca to Damascus wouldn't be that hard, right? You could take an airplane, you could drive on a freeway, you could probably take a train, right? Back then, all right, we're talking it's 750 AD. You have to take a camel through the desert and travel in a pack. It's actually dangerous. This is a huge deal for the religion. Then lastly, one thing that makes everybody really mad is that the Umayyads then surround themselves with riches and act like rich, snobby kings. Okay, they're bathing in a bathtub full of gold coins and wearing big fancy crowns. Okay, showing off their riches. Now, Muslims, for the most part, are known as being a very conservative and modest religion. All right, that's kind of the practices that they teach. What would be a reason that someone can think about what you think of with Muslims today? What would be a symbol of modesty that they have, or something that's reserved or conservative? Can anybody think of that? Yeah, Skylar.
What the girls wear.
Exactly. Okay, so women wear clothes that cover up all of their skin. Now, the reason for this, according to the faith, is it's a sign of modesty, and it's being very conservative. If the leaders are kind of getting away from that and being flashy and having all this gold and jewelry and big mansions, they're not setting an example of modesty for everybody else. So that was a big issue